Okay, so we were able to get the fencing attached to the gate. I went through. And everywhere that the fence touches these bottom 3 rungs, and we attached them with the lock wire. And it should be enough deterrent that Pigrious can't get out and that the other pigs can't get in. So all I need to do is a little bit of cleanup of the stall. We'll be able to move him in here this weekend, and it'll make it a little easier to feed him, and it'll allow us to open up the other field. We don't have to worry about the pigs trying to get through the electric fence. So the stall is pretty much done now, and ready. We're gonna throw some hay in there for him, get the water filled up and stuff like that, and just do general housekeeping stuff. In my last video, somebody asked how we combat the wind with our fasteners. So obviously we use coated screws for everything, so we don't have to worry about corrosion. But I wanted to show you guys just how we attach the side panels. They're not structural, but we do worry about the wind coming in and pulling them off. So I'll show you how we put those on. So we use a 1.25 inch for these, and then I use a fender washer that goes in between the screw and the paneling. It's like a 1/4 inch hole, and that way it's big enough for the screw to go through, but not big enough for the head of the screw to get through. So, and they seem to work pretty well. I mean, hopefully with the movement, it'll be a little bit harder to pull those through the sheet metal. And then for the roofing, I use a self-tapping, I think it's a 3/4 inch, or it's 1.25 inches as well, but it's got a rubber grommet underneath it to provide a watertight seal. So I also use way more than I need. Just again, we don't want the wind to catch it and pull one and then rip the whole sheet off. So we've been lucky that even with the high winds around here, we've only had one casualty, and that was our greenhouse had one of the vents come off during the 85-mile-an-hour wind, and it was only because we were a couple minutes late getting out there to strap it down. All right, and then I posted pictures of it to Instagram, and a buddy of mine asked for plans. I figured I'd go over just kind of how I go about designing our holding pens and my thought process on that kind of stuff. So this is 2 8-foot by 16 pens. Essentially what I did is I used 16-foot by 4-foot cattle panels. I didn't want to cut them down, and so we used one panel for the side, one panel for the other side, and then we just split it down the center. Gives them enough space to move around in. We can get 2 or 3 cows in there. We had 5 pigs in the other one for a very short amount of time, just till they were ready to butcher. Well, more till we were ready to butcher them. They were pretty much ready when they got here, but so I'll kind of go over how I design it. We use this area to kind of funnel animals either into the pens if they need to be separated, or if they need medication. It's a lot easier to get them in here and then give them their shots, or if we need to get them in the trailer. So I wanted to be able to fit the horse trailer in between the stall and the chicken run. So when I was setting it, we measured how wide the horse trailer was, and then I gave it like 1 or 2 inches on either side just to make it easier to back in. So if you look at it, yeah. Okay, so once I knew the distance that I wanted for the trailer, we went ahead and we set this gate post first. That way we knew that the distance from here to there was going to be perfect. And then we built that corner over there, and that way we knew this section of the fencing was going to be perfect. So once we knew the distance, put in flags where we wanted the posts to go, made sure that they were 16 feet apart for the corners, made sure the corner to corner was roughly the same so that we knew that the pens were going to be square. We did this post and the corner post first, and then what I did is I would dig the two posts dig the two holes for the two posts on this side, and then we would lay the cattle panel up, and then we would go off the end of the cattle panel to make sure that the corner post was done first, because we attached it to the one that we'd already set. And then I don't like measuring things if I don't have to. These cattle panels are roughly 16 feet, but they're not always exactly 16 feet. You do have some manufacturing discrepancies. So generally what we do is we attach it to the one that's already set in the ground, and then we pull it tight, and then we make sure that the post is going to have enough of the fence on it that we can get our horseshoe nails in. And then I set this with 2x4s, and then we go through and we set the center one so that it's as close to center as possible, and get it horseshoe nailed in a couple spots, and we set it with 2x4s. Once we got this wall done, the rest of them went really quick. Getting your corner and your first wall up generally takes the longest, and then making sure that your final corner is the second most tricky thing, because you're putting in the gates and then the other corner, and that's kind of free floating, right? Because that distance can change, that distance can change, but the gates have to be set perfectly, otherwise they won't close, or they'll have too much of a gap and then your locks won't work. So when determining that stuff, you have a lot of wiggle room. But when you're trying to match a rigid panel and a rigid panel to a corner that's opposite, you don't have as much wiggle room. So we got the first wall up, then we did the gate side, and then we were able to come off the two corners to come up with that corner, and then we just pretty much set the center off of it. I'll have some drawings that I will put in the description, and then I figured I'll go over just kind of how we put it together. So like I said, it's 4x4 posts for everything except for where the gates are. The gates we used 4x6s. For the center one, I wanted the most available wood to drive the hinges into, so we set it 6 inches this way, and that allowed us to drill in from both sides and get a pretty good amount of the hinge into the wood without it coming out the other side. For the latch side, we put them the 6-inch this way, so it's 4 inches this way, 6 inches that way, and that way we had more width to attach the latch to. I like these quick release hinges, or quick release latches that we have. It's a lot easier than chain. I could be carrying feed buckets in my hand, water buckets in my hand, and then I have my other hand free to pop them open and get through them. They're quick install. I usually start with the part that goes on the gate, and then you mount that on there, and it's just 2 carriage bolts that go through, and it clamps down to the side of the gate there, and then you can put spacers in behind this to make sure you have the right amount of gap. You don't want it too tight, otherwise it'll scrape on this back plate. You don't want it too far out, because then this won't really grab it. And then it's got an area down here to where you can lock them. it's been pretty convenient switching to these from the chains, just because you're not having to use both hands to get through them. You're not setting your stuff down, opening the gate, getting through, setting your stuff back down. Then the animals could get to the feed buckets before you're ready for them. They're just very convenient. And so to set this up, you measure the width of the gate, then you add the width for the hinge, and then you add, I usually add the width of the lock mechanism, and then about an inch from that lock mechanism to the gate. Usually seems to be about perfect. I think ours are set at they're 36-inch gate, and then I have about 4 inches on one side, and then it's like 2 to 3 inches. So I think they're like 42 and a half inches apart between the posts, and that'll get you where you need to be. But you always measure the width of your gate, the requirement for your hinge, and then the thickness of your latch plus about an inch, and they're almost always on. So yeah, and then so we attach the cattle panels to the sides of the 2x4s with horseshoe nails, and then because we were holding pigs in this one, we put a pressure treated 2x4 around the bottom, and then we drove stakes into the ground. We used 2-foot stakes. They're 2-inch by 2-inch. Drive them all the way down as far as we can get them without cracking them, and then you screw them in from the outside or the inside. Doesn't really matter as long as you get the screw in there, and then we can horseshoe nail from the opposite side into that 2x4. We haven't done that to the other side yet, but we eventually will. And then putting the tin on, I needed somewhere to attach the tin, so I added these vertical supports. I just split the difference. They're about a third of the way from each post, and then I did one on either side, and then you screw them together with 3-inch screws, and you can put your panels up against them. And then we added these top bars to most of the sides, so that way the fence itself wouldn't move back and forth. We figured the extra movement of the fence with the wind would speed up the process of the fasteners being pulled out. So we were just trying to keep that from happening. So we put the top brace on. Unfortunately, that top brace doesn't get put on the rest of the way, or like the rest of them did, because if we put it that way, you wouldn't be able to open the gate. So throws me off a little bit just because it is sitting differently, but I think it came out all right. And then when we were building this structure, it was pretty quick. Literally, I just took 2x4s. I think I used the 104.5-inch 2x4s. I went from the top corner of that 4x4, because we sink them 2 feet into the ground, so there's about 6 feet above the ground. And we screwed it to the top of that one, and then we went just an inch or two above the cattle panel on this one right here. And then I measured, or we put the 2x4s we were going across, had my wife hold it on one side, and then I marked it, and then we did the same at the top, and then we used those to make the other 3 crossovers. And then I just went between the 2, divided in half, that's where the center goes, and then divided in half, that's where the center of the other one goes. Mainly we were just trying to make sure that the tin didn't have to span more than 24 inches, because otherwise it starts to get too weak. We didn't want to worry about the snow, we didn't want to worry about rain, stuff like that. And then we put in these 2x4s that connect them all the way down on both sides that you saw in the last video, just to kind of give it a little bit more support. And I just did 2 sections of those. I didn't really feel the need to do 3 or 4 of them. They're just there to give it a little bit more rigidity. So yeah, hopefully between the drawings and my video, you can kind of see how we put it together. This works best for us because we use this side for when we do bottle calves. It's a lot easier to get them in here and then feed them their bottles than it is to try to do it out in the field. Like I said, we corral them in here when we're trying to give them their shots and stuff like that. And then now we've got the other side for Pigrious. I think we're going to put another roof on this side just so that the cows have somewhere to get out of the rain. And I will go a little bit more into the depth on how I built that with you guys in that video. Just because that was already put up from this summer because we had the butcher pigs in there. I needed to keep them out of the sun, otherwise they were gonna get sunburnt. And I wanted to make sure that they had a little place to get out of the summer rains. But our cows can't fit into the short awning that we have on the chicken coop for the pigs and the sheep and the goats, so we have to put something up for them, which I can show you guys now that it's daylight, the other shelter that we have that's permanently installed. So I'll go ahead and show you guys that now. So when we first started, we had the chickens and we got pigs, and we'd gotten one calf that lived through the spring, and it didn't really need too much shelter, but it could crawl underneath there if it wanted to. But we decided to put this on the chicken coop for the pigs because we knew we were going to be running pigs the whole time. And it works out because it's the same height that we need for the goats, it's the same height we need for the sheep, and it's attached straight to the chicken coop. And so that went together really well, and we did pretty much the same thing. It's built with tin roofing with the self-tapping screws with the grommets on them, so that way it doesn't leak water down there. We have it coated with vapor barrier that we use to wrap the whole chicken coop, and so it stays pretty dry throughout the winter. We throw hay underneath there so that they have some bedding to get down into, which we use the grass hay as all of our bedding because it breaks down faster than straw does in our compost. So whatever they don't use and gets too soiled, we'll clean it out, throw it in our compost pile, and then put new bedding down for them, which is what we're going to do for Pigrious in the new pen for him. If I put the sides up for the cows, then we'll put bedding in there for the cows too. Otherwise, it'll just blow around in there from the wind. So, all right. Hopefully that helps you guys out when you're building shelters for your pigs and your cows and sheep and stuff like that. So, thanks for coming along. This is Raising the Right Ranch, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the next one.